As Todd Wood and I walked through the zoo, we saw incredible beauty and amazing design wherever we looked. I noticed the great diversity between some animals, as well as the remarkable similarity of others.
As a biologist, what do you see when you see all of these creatures?
Yeah, when I look at this, look at these lions specifically, I'm seeing cats myself. And all the other cats they have here at the zoo, they all have this underlying catness to them that's really apparent. It's really apparent when they start playing, right? You're seeing them playing with some sort of ball or something, and
they're just like a cat.
They look like a cat. You know, scientists would put that into a family called Felidae. And I would understand the felids to be representatives of a single created kind. So the continuity, the similarity there is so significant that I'd say, yeah, these guys have all descended from a single pair of critters that was on the ark, and that eventually generated all the different sorts of cats that we have today.
So rather than just a random accident, it appears as if all of these different species are coming from a really elaborate design.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just a design like God, you know, designed and created the lion. It's God created something that could make a lion. So it's more like, you know, a multi-tool or a Swiss Army knife where you got all these pieces that you can just pop out whenever you need them, but it's all just one thing.
So give me some other examples of created kinds.
Yeah, so you've got the grizzlies and the polar bear. Those are all members of the bear kind. You've got ducks, swans, and geese. The thing about the dog kind is really interesting. So you take just this wolf-like creature, and we can breed in only a few hundred years many different breeds.
Well, Todd, that's kind of fascinating now to think about what God was doing when he was bringing two of every kind. What do you think was going on there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to bring every little variety onto the ark. So when you actually do the calculations, and okay, so we don't know exactly how many created kinds there were on the ark, but maybe a couple thousand, and they're small. Most animals are quite small, so you have room to spare, literally room to spare. And all of that diversity that we have today is built into those two of every kind.
Well, Todd, we're looking at the zebras, and they're all unique, and yet all of these creatures are just so much complexity and diversity. How does the standard story, the conventional paradigm, explain all of that?
Well, they would use evolution, right? So millions of years, random variations, all things that are alive now, that cactus, that zebra, the grass here, it's all related. We all go back to a common ancestor that lived billions of years ago. And through the process of mutation and genetic variation and natural selection, that's where we get the stuff that we have today.
So, natural selection, what is it? Does it have the kind of creative potential that we need for all of this?
Natural selection is basically all about killing off things that aren't fit for the environment. So if you're a finch in the Galapagos and you have a really tiny beak and the only food available to you is really big, hard seeds, you're gonna die. And that's exactly what we observe. And so we can watch over the generations as the beak size and finches change in the Galapagos. But they're still finches, they're still birds. The notion that natural selection can generate all of the diversity we see, that's not been demonstrated. What we find most often with natural selection is that natural selection does a lot of fine-tuning. So right over here, we've got these oryxes, right? Beautiful creatures and very, very pale colors. The wild range of the oryx is right on the southern end of the Sahara Desert. And so you can see, yeah, their coloration makes sense. If you get a really dark colored one, that's going to be really easy for predators to find. And so they end up being these really beautiful light colors. And that's an example of where selection would take a variation and turn it into an adaptation.
And that brings us back to the notion that a really exquisite design in the beginning
I think so. Absolutely.
Has provided these creatures with the ability to survive and to change for their benefit.
Absolutely. So the ability to be able to change your coloration like that, to be able to fit an environment, that's got to be built into the system before it starts. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, natural selection and random variation can do amazing things. I mean, it's pretty astonishing the kinds of changes that we can see, but we don't see one kind changing into another. All we see are variations that happen within a created kind. So there's a felid tree, which has all the cats on it. There's the canid tree, which has all the dogs on it. There's the ursid tree, which has all the bears on it. There's the equid tree with all the horses on it. Each individual created kind then has its own individual tree, so that you end up with something like an orchard or a forest.
As a scientist, it seems what you're saying is that the Genesis paradigm answers all of this data better.
Ultimately, I think it does, because it embraces both similarity and difference. Now, as we've already said, there's lots of questions that are still out there. But I'm pretty confident, given what our paradigm can explain, I'm very confident that those answers are going to be found.